You're watching Wake Up Today.
Well, the Hawaii State Bar Association Young Lawyers Division is observing Law Week, and volunteer attorneys have been covering different legal topics every single day. Today, the topic is personal injury. With more details is Derek Kobayashi, who is a member of Schlack Ito LLC. Good morning.
Good morning, Brian. Nice to meet you.
All right. Had a cup of coffee?
I did.
Okay. Let's talk about this. So, personal injury. Now, you understand it, but for the average person, what is that?
Yeah, personal injury, generally speaking, involves cases where someone may have been physically injured in an accident or a slip and fall motor vehicle accident. It's the typical type of cases we see in the personal injury area. Yeah.
Okay, for personal injury now, people that come into your office, what's some of the misconceptions about personal injury?
Yeah, you know, some of the misconceptions, I think, especially nowadays when people have access to things like AI and they do searches, I think some of the misconception may be the value or the settlement value of their case. You know, it can be difficult, even if the liability is clear of the defendant, if that defendant isn't insured or may not have recoverable assets, and then folks have talked to friends or searched the internet with the AI, they may not, Brian, have a realistic settlement value of their case, and it may make it difficult, later on to try to make a significant financial recovery.
So they may have a false sense of what they're getting or should be getting.
I think that's correct, yes.
Okay, so let's say the injury happens. Now, what should somebody do as far as documentation?
You know, as far as documentation, we always like to say that a person in those circumstances should be an accurate historian of their own condition, whether it was in the subject accident itself, or even with respect to prior injuries or conditions they may have been involved in. I think principally, most of us would say, you know, the person should focus on their recovery. As far as the documentation, there will typically be police reports, eyewitness reports, or diagnostic imaging that can document their injury. So really, they should focus on their recovery.
And we were talking about this earlier. Well, I actually asked the question to you earlier in the green room. Personal injury, workers' compensation.
Right.
It's two separate.
Workers' compensation is really a subset, I think, when it comes to personal injury, right? For those who are injured on the job, in the premises, or in the course and scope of their employment, under Hawaii law, their exclusive remedy would be through the workers' compensation system. Whereas someone who's injured outside of that conditions could make a general recovery under the general laws that would apply. Yeah.
Okay, and anything new, any big news coming down the pike for personal injury?
I think last checked with the legislature, they were considering amending the statute of repose, which would be the time limit that someone could bring a personal injury claim as related to defective constructions situation. And then there was a related measure about increasing the amount of minimum motor vehicle insurance coverage. At last check, those were the things that I saw that were pending at the legislature that may have moved along now that we're later in the session.
Okay, and finally, Derek, let's say as far as personal injury, what do you think is the most important thing for someone to do as far as to keep top of mind? Yeah,
I think, again, if you're in those set of circumstances, the most important thing is to focus on your recovery. And remember that if you get involved in a personal injury lawsuit, there are many highly qualified Hawaii State Bar Association members who would represent the injured party, as well as, on the other hand, Brian, there are very qualified Hawaii State Bar Association members who would represent the defendants as well. Both parties will have skilled advocates, and getting to a resolution of a lawsuit, if it comes to that, may take time. So please keep that in mind.
All right, Derek Kobayashi.
Thank you, Brian.
Mahalo for your time. Appreciate it. All right, so it is Law Week, and every day this week we'll have a different topic, so make sure you tune in tomorrow. All right, coming up next, a quick check on those morning traffic conditions. And of course, just ahead, we're going to have a full forecast for today and the week ahead when Wake Up Today returns.